This is Join Us in France, episode 35. Hello, I'm Annie.
And I'm Elise.
And we welcome you to the Join Us in France travel podcast. Elise is a professional tour guide, art historian, and a really good storyteller.
Sometimes.
On today's show, we're having seconds. We're going back to talking about pastries, but this time the pastries of the north of France. But of course, you know us. We'll talk about whatever we want. So I have to ask you, Elise, did you buy any pastries this week?
Oh, why did you ask me that? Actually, yes, I did.
You did?
Yes, I did.
What'd you get?
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do. You have
Eclairs.
Eclairs. Were they good?
I'm going to talk about them. Yeah. Well, it's funny because being that I'm not someone who eats a lot of cream.
You all right?
Eclairs is one of the few things I just cannot resist. You
Yeah.
see? And it's like, and then we have this thing in our family about whether it should be coffee or chocolate, you see.
Yeah, okay. And where do you fall on that?
I fall in between. Actually,
I see. You can't decide.
I can't decide.
One of
So
each.
what happens is I kind of argue about we should have half of each, and my husband says no, because he doesn't like the chocolate ones at all. He's just a coffee guy.
I
you
see.
So
Something's wrong with him.
a lot of things are wrong with him, but there's something else. But so what happens is basically I have to give up and buy 3. So that he can have one full one made of coffee, with coffee, and then I get to have usually one half of each, and he winds up eating the rest, whatever it is, But I can't resist eclairs. It's terrible.
We had lemon tart this week for
well,
birthday.
That's one of my favorite things, but
Yeah.
I make those, you see. I mean, that's
I
something.
should have made it because it wasn't as nice as I remembered. So I should have. Next time I'll just make one.
Eclairs, I mean, I think I did once in my life, but I'll go to a nice bakery and buy them. I'm happy with that. It's a lot quicker.
But I think I should get a medal because I didn't buy any any breakfast
didn't.
pastries. Even though I walk past the bakery first thing in the morning every day.
Every day.
Yes, and they're always baking something really, really
And it
that
usually
smells really
wonderful.
good. But they're closed because I usually go by there at 6 in the morning.
Oh God.
And it's and it's closed. And so I always think, I'll go back later, but I didn't this week.
Well, you're a very good girl,
No,
Annie.
give me a medal.
I'll give you a medal. No, if I walked past a bakery every morning, I'd probably be 5 tons because I would not be able to resist. Oh man. Okay, that was the other thing. We had some family over this weekend, and so my son-in-law he went out and bought croissant and all of that one morning,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's like I looked at him, it's like, did you really have to do this? And I just go away, Oh well, that's what weekends are for, I guess.
That's right. That's what it's for. All right. To find show notes, photos, recipes, go to joinusinfrance.com/34. And now we'll do a little music and get back to it. Listeners had some interesting comments on the last show on the pastries of southern France. A lady called Fatima says pastries are one of the things that she misses the most in France. And I have to agree. When I leave, that's what I miss. The bread and the pastries are what I miss the most about France.
Is that really what you miss the most?
I think so. Well, family, but
well, you mean in terms of food? It's
Yes.
bread and pastries.
yes.
Well,
yes.
bread, I definitely agree.
Yeah. And somebody called Kay asks if tourteau fromager from Poitou
Yeah,
is a dessert or cheese.
it's a dessert.
That's what I told her.
It's a dessert.
Yeah.
And it's always strange because I think I did not actually mention it, did I? I had it on the list and I somehow skipped it. It's very strange because it always has that black covering and it of
Yes.
course looks like an upside down hat or something like, or mold for making hats.
Yes.
But it is considered to be a dessert, even though there's very little sugar in it.
Uh-huh.
And it is basically a kind of very light cheesecake where they incorporate
Exactly.
beaten egg whites.
Right.
And so it's interesting because it's basically a combination of almost like a brioche dough, but with a light white, what here they would call fromage frais, that's beaten up. So it's kind of like a whipped cottage cheese kind of
So
thing.
making it with fromage frais is the last. It's a recent development. They used to make it with goat cheese.
Oh, did they?
Yes, that's the traditional way.
Oh.
And now to make it lighter, they make it with fromage
Oh,
frais.
that's interesting.
Which is also has less flavor, but
Yeah.
Anyway, the only reason why I know this is because I found this lovely blog. It's a French lady who translates her blog into English, and her English is not perfect, but it's good enough. And she has a whole blog post about the tourteau de fromager.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's in English, and she gives the recipe and photos and step by step. And so I put a link. So if you go to joinusinfrance.com/33, in the comments, in response to what Kay said, I send you to the right page.
That's interesting. And talking about that, there's something that I know, and I've actually tried to make, but I love it, but it's not the greatest when I make it, from Corsica, which of course is a part of France, but is in a sense, in terms of its cuisine and everything, far more Italian. And they make a cheesecake called a fiordone. And it's a lovely, and it's not very heavy. It's not an American cheesecake. It's made with what's called brooch, which is a very light kind of uncurdled cottage cheese that is from sheep's milk.
Okay.
And it's got a slight lemon. They add lemon zest and rind to it, and it's made basically with that and eggs and some flour, and it's just absolutely delicious.
Oh, well, I've never tried that.
No, it's not that hard to make, but it's really the authentic one. I mean, you can make it with a different kind of cheese, but the real one is made with this Corsican fresh cheese called a brooch.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Larry says, still I'm on the comments, Larry says he's finding it difficult to find anything with cinnamon in France. And from what he says, I think he lives in the Bordeaux area.
Okay.
So,
That's strange because the cannelés, of course, have cinnamon.
But it's not strong.
But it's not strong. When you know what, as we work our way up across in a kind of arc across northern France, the two areas that I've saved for last are the two that have the most interesting pastries, and one of them, of course, is the Northeast.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say.
That's when we're going to get into cinnamon.
If you go kitty corner from Bordeaux all the way to Strasbourg, there you start finding a lot more cinnamon and a lot more like northern spices.
Things that I think more are similar to more what Americans are used to seeing in certain ways.
Right. But what he's missing is cinnamon rolls. And it's true that we don't, as far as I know, I don't think there's a tradition of cinnamon rolls in France. That's a German and Germanic kind of thing.
It's a very Germanic thing, yes.
Yeah.
Cinnamon is actually an interesting spice, but it's not used a lot in cooking in France.
Yeah. I think that's true. So anyway, thank you, listeners who go to the website and write comments on there. It's very fun to see.
And I just wanted to add that I've been following to see who has chosen cheese or who has chosen pastry, and it's really fun to watch because I really don't see, personally, I'm on the pastry side, really, because you know me, and I eat cheese a little bit, but not that much, even though I think some cheeses are wonderful. But it's really kind of fun to see. It looks like it's going to be like the War of the Roses, between the cheese people and the pastry people.
Well, honestly, I think if you're having a big family meal, I always serve both.
Yes.
But every day, if I want something wicked at the end of a meal, I usually don't have pastry on hand, so I usually go for a little bit of cheese. Right? So I have a hard time deciding if I'm more cheese or pastry. I think both are divine. So.
Yeah, they are. I think that there's still probably less sin attached to the idea of cheese than there is attached to the idea of pastry. Somehow when you eat a little cheese...
in terms of calories, I think you can pack on the calories faster with the cheese than with with dessert.
Well, especially have a triple cream one or something like that.
Yes,
which
some
is
of
the
these
kind
French cheeses are like,
no.
whoa.
Okay, let's talk about these cakes because I'm starting to get hungry already. So let's start with the Alps, partly because one of my favorite things in the world is walnuts. And one of the two regions where there are lots and lots of walnuts in France is, in fact, in the region around the city of Grenoble, which is in the Alps, in the Savoy Alps. And interestingly enough, walnuts have an AOC. Just like wines do, just like some cheese. Just, so remember, this is Appellation d'origine contrôlée, which means that if you buy a bag of walnuts, it's marked AOC. It means that it's designated coming specifically from one of two very special regions where there are lots and lots of walnut tree groves. And one of them is indeed in the valleys of the Alps. And so, of course, one of the cakes that's a very basic cake, but it's delicious, is the walnut cake, which comes from this area. And
I love that.
And I love that too. Isn't it funny? Because you don't like things with almonds, but you love everything with walnuts.
It's just almonds
Isn't
I have
that
a
weird?
problem with.
And this cake, interestingly enough, because I've made my own version of it, and I guess you have too, but the one I was looking up and talking about the regional special recipes is made with honey.
Yeah.
Honey, ground walnuts, and they actually caramelize the sugar and they mix it in. So this is of course not a cream cake. This is basically a cake in the sense of what the French call a cake, and it's very lovely. And it's of course the best thing is if it's made with the walnuts from this area. I happen to usually go out and every winter get 2 or 3 kilos of walnuts because I just love walnuts. I mean, they're wonderful in salads and cakes and everything.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And that sort of walnut cake is very much like, well, not very much, but it's kind of like a pecan kind of cake, except that it has it's that family of cakes. Let's put it that way.
It's in that family of cakes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then there are 2 other things that are more on the order of small things. Remember last time we were talking about whether cookies are included and what kind of cookies and all of that. Well, there's one called a bouffette de menthe, which is actually from a small town in the Alps. I like this. I had to talk about it because I saw this picture. Yeah, bouffette.
De quoi? Bouffette
de M-E-N-S, Mentz. I guess.
M-E-N-S, okay.
Yeah, M-E-N-S is the town. And they're pretty.
Okay.
I think that's one of the reasons why I thought they would be fun to show. They're dry cookies that are in the form of a ring.
Okay.
And what happens is then you cut them open horizontally.
Yeah.
And there's this special cream with sugar that's put inside. And there's a secret recipe to this cream. So they don't export them. They're mostly sold in the region, in that area. But apparently there's this one company that is famous for making them. And just like with certain other products that we know about, the secret is not to be told.
Of course.
So all I can say is that they are really cute and they're actually fun. I think I did eat a couple of them the last time I was up in that area. And
now, what area is that again?
This is in the Alps. This is
Alps, okay.
In the Alps, but south of Grenoble. So I guess middle south Alps. The Alps are big.
I used to spend time there when I was younger, but I don't remember if I ever had those. Although knowing me, I probably ate a ton and I just forgot.
You might have, right? And there's something else that's also from there, and it's a kind of donut, but that's not in a ring. Okay. And the special difference is that these are made with puff paste dough.
Okay.
So they wind up being kind of like little balls, and then they're deep fried, and then they have sugar around the outside of them. But I don't know if I have ever tasted them. But it's interesting that instead of whatever the basic dough of a beignet would be, these are specifically made with the same dough that you would use for making eclairs and all of those other things.
Choux.
So like a choux, but a deep fried one.
Wow.
Right?
And what are they called, these cakes?
They're just called beignets. And they're just, it seems to be a very basic thing, but it's associated with B-E. They call them B-E-I-G-N-E-S, which would be like beignet.
Yeah. Okay.
And they apparently are associated with Mardi Gras.
Oh, okay.
So, interestingly enough, in looking up the history of some of these things, a lot, not all of them, but a lot of them are associated with either Mardi Gras, with Christmas time, or some kind of holiday.
Yeah.
I guess the basic reason being, and this is just basically when you think about it, that until the last century or so, except for very simple little dry cookie type things or things that are deep fried, most fancy cakes were really for the very rich.
Yeah.
Having a lot of cream and butter was really only for the very rich.
Of course, yeah.
And so you only had really nice fancy things on very special occasions.
Exactly.
And the occasions in general, until the recent past, were always usually connected to religious holidays anyway.
Yeah.
You know?
Hang on, before you move on, I want to mention something.
Yeah.
See, there, when you talk about puff pastry,
Yeah.
and I think there's a problem with the English language.
Why?
Because in English, you use the same word, puff pastry,
Right.
for choux and for feuilleté.
Yeah.
And it's not the same dough at all, because choux is a looser dough
Right.
that will puff, and feuilleté is a rolled dough.
Exactly.
So I think I saw online that some people call it a choux dough. You know, and to specify that it's this kind of dough that you use to make eclairs or
Right.
you know, that sort of thing that puffs up and creates a hole in the middle that gets filled.
It's funny that you talk about that, because I went online and I used my bilingual dictionary yesterday. And so for me, puff paste is choux, and flaky pie dough is feuilleté. And it looked in the I have a very good, really complete bilingual dictionary.
So do I.
And it said, I went through all the different kinds of, the pâte, and it was pâte feuilletée, pâte brisée, etc. And they said you can call it flaky pie dough.
Okay.
As a way of making a difference between your basic pie dough.
Okay.
And then they said you could say choux, but I'm not used to hearing it called choux. I'm used to hearing it called puff paste.
I know.
Dough.
It's
interesting.
It's like it's a strange thing about English that I hadn't noticed until today.
I don't know. It could be also regional. It really could be. Just like, that, an example here in France would be that a pain au chocolat and a chocolatine. It depends on where you come from in the country,
right.
So I really don't know. But in my mind, I know a couple of people. This is like one of those things for the questions where you ask the jury, and how to win a million. I know a couple of people who are makers of a lot of pastries in the States. I'm going to write and ask them what they call it, just as a way. But you're right.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to be clear. Puff paste dough is the kind that you use for eclair and all these things that puff up, and they're like popovers. So they're hollow in the center. Flaky dough for me is the feuilleté.
But if you go to a grocery store in America and actually this is a big difference. In America, the rolled pastry are frozen.
Right.
In France, they're usually not frozen. You will find them in the fresh.
And there are 2 or 3 kinds.
And there's several kinds, yeah.
Right.
But and the other thing that happens is that in America, you can buy your pie crust already in the disposable pie.
Right.
Yeah. In France, you usually don't see that.
No.
You will have to just buy the rolled dough and put it in your pie.
But it is really so much easier here, because not only are they fresh, so you don't have to worry about defrosting it. You have 2 or 3 kinds. They're usually very good, and they're so easy to use.
Yeah.
Just roll them out.
That's right. Well, you just open it, and they come with a
wax paper.
Wax paper, and so you just unroll that, and it's really easy. I mean,
it's really easy.
Yeah, you don't even have to get out the rolling pin or anything. So,
unless you want to hit somebody over the head, somebody's trying to interfere while you're making something. Be careful.
Good point. Whoa.
Watch out. Okay, so I that is pretty much what I could say about the region
Alps.
Around the Alps.
Okay.
We're just going to move around a little bit, because I'm saving the big three areas basically for the last part, because those are the places, interestingly enough, that I think have the most things that people have heard of already,
Mm-hmm.
that they know about. And obviously it's because they're regions that are very big on making pastries.
Yeah.
So, but there are a couple. One, I couldn't find a name for it, but it's something that you and I have both seen. And so it comes from Picardy. And for people who don't know Picardy is the northwest of France. It's it's above Paris. I guess it's the same. Is Picardy Ch'ti country? Would that be correct
There's
to
probably
say?
it's in that neighborhood.
It's
There
in
might
that
be
neighborhood,
a
right?
distinction, but I don't know it.
And Picardy is interesting because it's a region that also has some coastline on the real northwest side of France. And it's an area where people still speak a kind of dialect a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of interesting because there are not too many areas left like that. But they are the ones who invented, because I've seen it here, and I know when we have our Christmas market, you'll see it again, the cake on a spit.
Ah, yes.
The one that's made with it's basically a batter that's like a very thick crepe batter.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, I guess it was invented by, I would imagine, farmers a couple of centuries ago who had batter, and they had their hearth where they did their cooking, and they have a spit. And what they do is it's turned with a crank, and little by little, by putting the batter, as it gets poured on it, it gets turned, and it turns into this waffly kind of cake.
Yeah.
And then you keep adding to it. And and the picture was wonderful. It's this picture, and apparently in some of the towns in Picardy where they make it, they actually have a word for it which really describes a tree, because if you look at it when it gets all done, if you start at the base and you keep turning and turning and turning, it looks almost like a Christmas tree when you get done.
Huh.
And then when they take it off,
So
they
what's
actually...
that cake called?
I couldn't find a name for it. It just says cake on a spit, and there must be a local name in Picard, the local dialect, but
Okay.
I couldn't find it. Maybe you can find it online.
I'll look it up. Let's see if I'll find it.
And
Maybe.
it's fun, and it's of course just this. It's really kind of like it's nice because it's very much like a very fresh, waffly kind of thing, where it's crisp on the outside and soft and a little chewy on the inside, and they sprinkle some sugar on it.
Yeah, I had something like that in southern Germany. But what they do there, it's a rolled dough that's sliced, and then they take it looks like it's in the shape of, I don't know, a belt or something, and then they roll that around a spit, and it's like turned in front of a heat source. And then they add whatever you want, cinnamon,
other spices, things,
whatever. Yeah, and those were really good.
They were good.
Oktoberfest, actually, they serve those all the time.
Well, now that you say that, it reminds me that what it did say was that the idea of a cake on a spit is actually there are several countries that have that. So it may be that the batter recipe is a little bit different, whatever.
Right.
But it seems to have been, again, like these little small cakes or dried things, a basic concept of a cake that began maybe before the people had ovens in their houses,
Could
because
be, yeah.
in the old days, there was an oven in the center of town very often. And whether you had bread dough or anything else, you actually took it to the ovens to be baked, and people didn't have it in their homes. Now, to go to we're going sort of across the top, something I've had, and I happen to love because I also like things that are made with a basic brioche dough. When I was in Lille, which was a while ago, but it's a nice city. We'll have to do a visit there soon.
Yep.
They have something called a kramique.
Kramique.
And in the I don't know if we can mention brands of
K
chains.
or C?
C. Cramique.
Okay.
And it's also from the north. It's from Nord-Pas-de-Calais. And it's a brioche that has crystal sugar through it and lots of dried raisins. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And when I remember when we were in Lille, talk about not being able to resist. My idea is resist except on vacation. See, that's basically it. So I don't resist on vacation. And we went into a couple of these wonderful little bakeries, and they had big ones. You can get like a big round one, or you can get individual ones that would be like a bun. And it's wonderful. It's just this brioche that has these crunchy little pieces of crystal sugar inside, not too much, and lots of these wonderful dried raisins.
That would be
and
good.
Apparently the name is Flemish because it's not only in the Lille area, but also if you go up into Flanders and that
Yeah.
Flemish-speaking part of
Yeah.
Belgium, you will find the same thing. But
Cool.
this one I knew about because I had already had it. So you can find it in some of the chain bread and pastry stores that are all over France. I don't know if we should mention things.
Sure.
Paul,
Okay.
which originated in the north,
Okay.
in the area around Lille. They do, at certain times of the year, sell it, and they do, in fact, call it that. It's a cramique.
Okay, I will have to try that. There's Paul stores everywhere.
Everywhere.
Won't be hard.
And then moving around, we go to the Vendée. The Vendée. How do we explain where the Vendée is? Okay.
Vendée.
The Vendée. The Vendée is west of.
It's on the west coast.
It's southwest of Paris. It goes as far as the coast, and it's a region that's basically south of Brittany.
That's right. It's below Brittany.
It's below Brittany. Okay. And they're famous for their kind of brioche, the Vendéenne brioche, which is a very light, eggy, not as buttery kind of brioche. And if you go, as I did...
You mean they don't put sandou in there?
They may put a little bit in. We won't talk about sandou. But they don't... It's not a really rich... What
sandou.
it is. Sandou. When you go up to Brittany from the south, you drive through the Vendée area, which is not very mountainous area, and it's there are these big signs everywhere for the Vendéenne brioche, So my husband, who's not particularly a great fan of this region for all kinds of reasons we won't go into here, but he looks at me because he knows that at least once I want to stop
Of course.
and buy a piece of this kind of brioche. But that's basically their contribution to gastronomy, which isn't enormous. So I'm sorry if there's anybody out there. Well, whatever, But it's the brioche from Vendée.
Okay, I have to explain what sandou is. I make fun of this area because sandou is a pork fat, but it's pure fat. And they use it in everything.
Kind of like Crisco,
Yeah, but
Crisco's vegetal, I know.
Yeah, right. This is a pork fat, and really, they go all over. And the reason why we make fun of them in Toulouse is because in Toulouse we use duck fat for everything.
Exactly.
But we don't put duck fat in pastries. I'm pretty sure they put sandou in. What are you saying? We put duck fat in pastries?
You know what? We put duck in so many different things in this area that I would not be surprised. I don't want to know in any event if we do.
Well, I had an interesting conversation with my daughter has a friend who's training to be a pastry chef, and he had lunch with us the other day. And so I asked him some questions, and he trains. So now pastry people here, the basic training is 2 years to be allowed to become a pastry professional anywhere in France. And then you can go on and do much, much more than that. But one of the things that is pretty made very clear to them is that you have to get the right kind of butter, the right kind of sugar, the right kind of flour. And depending on what you make, you don't use the same butter. There's special butter to make the kind of rolled puff pastry.
Right.
That, you don't use the same butter for that you would use in other cakes. And depending on the grade of butter that you use and the price of the butter that you use, you will be able to charge more or less. It's the same with a croissant. Croissant can be bought
with butter.
Yeah, croissant au beurre, which then is that specific puff pastry kind of butter. But if it doesn't say croissant au beurre, then it's made with margarine.
Right.
And it's a little cheaper. Whereas chocolatine or pain au chocolat are always made with butter.
Oh, is that right?
That's right.
Always?
Always. You have to use butter.
I always thought it was the same dough and they simply added the chocolate into it.
No, it's when they have them prepare chocolatine from scratch,
right?
It's a dough with butter. It's never a dough with margarine. So there are rules. It's really funny. They have rules that these corporations impose on how you produce and what butter and what sugar and what brand do you use to make this and what alcohol. If you add some alcohol, use this brand of alcohol, not that brand of alcohol.
Really, they can demand that.
Yes. It's very they're trained very specifically to use the right product for the right results.
I know that there are one of the things that, and I'm not a butter eater in general, and but
You
it is
fool.
well. Whatever. I mean, I'm not someone who appreciates the
don't like butter.
taste. I don't really like it that much. But what is amazing to me is that France is a country that has regions with different regions that produce butter, and they do indeed have a different taste. And there's butter from the Charente, there's butter from Vendée, there's butter from Brittany, it's really quite amazing.
And you probably have AOC butters
and
too.
you have AOC butters. You do indeed.
Yeah.
You have butters from Normandy, of course. You know, I mean,
you even have AOC sour cream in France.
right.
What is it called? Dicigny or something?
Isigny.
Isigny.
It's the same area as one of the finest butters. In fact,
and if you want to make your pastries with, if you want to make your pastries with that kind of butter, with that kind of sour cream, you will pay more than.
Right. I mean, that's again when we're talking about the price of why these really made from scratch things are so expensive.
It's not surprising. Now that I talked to the the trainee, the pastry chef trainee, I realized that really there are a lot of good reasons why some of these pastries are expensive.
So expensive.
It's because they make them with specific grades of products, and so if you see one pastry that's €2 and right next to it one that's €4, there's a good reason for it.
There's probably a good reason why.
There's
that's
a good
right.
reason. Yeah.
Talking about butter,
Yes.
let's move on to the region of Brittany.
Brittany.
Butter is one of the basic components of cuisine in Brittany. And when I cross the line, even in the car going from the south up there, I can start feeling like my cheeks are puffing out already. It's just there's nothing you can do in Brittany that does not include butter. It's a region, of course. Brittany is enormous, and it's the extreme western part of France. It is a region that is very far from a Mediterranean climate, so they do not use oil in their cooking. We're talking traditionally, of course. What people do now is a little bit different, of course. But they do not use any oil. They use butter as their basic fat. And the basic components of everything are butter, honey, eggs, and then you move on to apples, because apples are a shared property of both Normandy and Brittany. But let's just talk about a couple of the pastries that come from Brittany. I was just up there. These are literally things where if I walk into the pastry shop and look at them, I know I've just put on a kilo. So I don't have to eat them, you see. It doesn't make any difference because that's the way it is. There is something called the couille amen.
Les quoi?
It's the word in Celtic in the
Okay,
the
you're gonna
language.
have to spell that.
Okay, it's really, and everyone calls it that. It's not called anything else. It's couille amen. It's
Spell it.
Couigh, and second word Amann.
Oh my goodness.
And guess what it means? Butter cake.
Okay.
Okay.
Butter cake.
Butter cake.
I can say butter cake.
Okay.
I cannot say
when
that
you
word.
walk into my husband loves this kind of stuff, right? So you walk in. This is sold in every pastry shop anywhere in Brittany.
Oh,
Anywhere
okay.
in Brittany. And it is literally, okay, this is what it is. It is a brioche dough that has been basically rolled out, and sugar, very finely ground sugar. So this is even crystal sugar, but very, very finely,
it's fine.
almost powdered sugar. And thick layers of butter are put across it. Then it is folded. Then it is rolled out again, and then it is folded, and then rolled out again. And you do this a number of times. And then it is put in a round pan, and it rises. And what happens is, and it caramelizes on the outside. So when you see it, and you can get a relatively small one, like about 6 or 7 inches across, and then they get bigger and bigger. What you see is the melted butter and sugar covering basically the top with this sort of caramelized thing. It is literally,
I can tell I would like this.
it is literally one of the most fattening things you could ever possibly put in your mouth. It turns out that according to what I was seeing in terms of research that it was invented by accident
Ah.
in the 1860s. Obviously, it must have been some poor pastry
Happy
maker,
accident.
right, who had some brioche dough, and however the butter and the sugar wound up being on it, folded it over, put it in, and up comes this thing. It is unbelievably gorgeous to look at.
Huh.
It is just wonderful. If I eat a sliver of it, that's it for the rest of the day.
Well,
I just can't.
I'm not surprised that the folding matters, because that's one of the other things I learned from talking to this trainee pastry chef, is that they are told exactly how many times they're supposed to roll, how many times they're supposed to fold. There are rules.
There are
and
rules,
what
huh?
direction they fold in. So if you're making chocolatine, it's not the same number of folds that if you're making croissant. It's like
Right.
It's all so. It's like a dance or some ballet or something. It's all orchestrated.
It's all orchestrated,
they
and of
tell
course
you
it's all
exactly how you do it.
legislated. As
Also,
well.
yeah.
There's this idea of
So
this is the
probably
official
this
thing. Right?
pastry guy, he was trying to make something different. Didn't work out.
It
but
didn't work
but he
out,
got
right.
something good too.
Oh, and let me tell you, because I was up there for just a little bit over a week, and there are a couple of wonderful pastry shops in the town nearby, and there's a line outside every morning to get some bread. The bread in Brittany isn't that great, but they buy this and they buy two other things and that are made specifically in Brittany. And boy, oh boy, they must do a lot of swimming afterwards, because otherwise
cold water.
I cannot imagine doing it. See, and now there's another thing that comes from Brittany that I do love, and that is the phare.
Oh yes, I've
The
heard
phare
of that.
breton, which is basically a flan, but made with more flour in it, so that it's actually heavier than a custard flan.
Yeah.
And it's traditionally made with dried prunes, although it can be made with apples as well. And I love that. See,
Yeah, that's
now
very
that it's not quite as buttery. It is
Right.
something that is absolutely delicious, and it is very much also something that you will find in every good pastry shop, and of course you find it in the supermarkets as well.
Yeah, you can find
and
it.
you can find it pretty much everywhere, but it's definitely from Brittany.
Yeah. Oh, I have to tell this cute story from when I was a young teenager. I was probably 13. I think it was in my 13th summer. So I went away for summer vacation to camp, which is a tradition both in America and in France. So I'm away at camp, and this is a biking camp in Brittany. And I made a little friend, and he and I were not the best bikers in the universe. And so we always used to arrive last. And after a few days of that, the group just caught on that they should not wait for us, and they would just leave us way behind with a map and indications of where we were supposed to go. But that one day we got lost, and there was a farmhouse. So this is like country roads out in the. I have no idea where we were, but we were in Brittany somewhere, and there's this country farmhouse. And we go in and we stop and ask for directions. And the nice lady says, "Oh, well, come on in." And she fills up our water jugs, tells us where we're supposed to go, and gives us a cookie and a glass of cider. And the cider was very good. It was a sweet cider. They have two kinds of cider in Brittany. They're
Right.
both what you'd call hard cider,
Right,
although they're
slightly
like
fermented.
yeah, they're like 3% alcohol or
Right.
something like that. It's not a heavy kind of. And it was really, really good. And so my friend and I, we look at each other and we're like, I think we're going to do this again. So a few farmhouses later, we empty our water bottles and we just go in. This time we didn't pretend to be lost. We just said, "Hey, can we fill out our water bottles?" And sure enough, she gave us
Another cookie?
another cookie, and another glass of cider. And we did this 5 or 6
This
times.
is a scam. You were 13 years old and doing scams already.
And by the time we got to the rendezvous point, we had a lot of cider.
You had a lot of cider.
We had a wonderful day. I'm never forgetting that day. It was great.
Obviously, did you go back another day, or
No.
you didn't dare, huh?
No, after that, the people who were running the camp were caught on to us and just kept a closer eye on us after that.
Oh, well, there you are, Annie.
But I love the people of Brittany. They're
Now,
lovely to kids.
Talking about cookies, I was going to mention this other thing. This is called the palette or the palais, P-A-L-E-T.
Yeah.
And of course, that is basically a very small. It looks like. Well, we have to explain what a palais is. Actually, it's like a hockey puck.
Yeah, it looks like a hockey puck.
It's thick. It's about almost an inch thick.
And it's a butter cookie.
And it's a crumbly,
almost like
butter
a shortbread.
Cookie. Exactly, with lots of butter. And and you can now, of course, buy it in any commercial. There are lots of, you can get this homemade or made in a fine pastry store. But now, of course, you have many different brands in the supermarket.
They're exported everywhere.
And of course, you can even get them now with chocolate in them, a little bit of chocolate.
Right.
Those are just melt in your mouth. Those are absolutely delicious.
These are kinds where I think they might be a little bit too buttery for me.
Oh, really?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to see you eat one of the couillamen and see what happens then. You just have to be there to watch. Which reminds me, there's something else which comes from the region that is really. It's borderline, but it's something that is a basic cake that is known everywhere in France, but it's up from that northwest area, and that is the quatre quarts.
Oh, yes.
Which is the French equivalent of a pound cake.
Yes.
And of course, it means very simply that flour, sugar, butter, and eggs are in equal proportions, mixed together with a teeny little bit of vanilla. Sometimes now people put in lemon or something like that, and it's just yummy. And it's the same thing because a pound cake is that. It's originally a pound of this, a pound of that, and you put it all together. And it's really basically, I would say that most people everywhere in France have had it, and it's sold in all the stores and everything. But it does come from that region up there, the basic butter flour region of France,
Yeah, there was always one of those quatre quarts cakes at my parents' house because my dad loved it. So
and it is yummy. It really is yummy. Now there's something I want to mention because I've always loved when I remember taking my first French lessons. This is silly, I know, but this is I don't think I've had this more than once in my life. But it's a cake made with a flaky a flaky crust, and this is called a pithivier.
Oh, yeah, pithivier, yeah.
Which comes from basically the part of the Normandy region.
Yeah.
But it's because I love the word. I love the name of it. I just love it. I don't know why. And so what this is it's made with a flaky crust. It was invented apparently in the 1600s for some very wealthy lord. I don't know. Somebody in the family was being inventive. And the basic ingredient besides the dough, so it's not for you, but it's definitely for me, is crushed almonds and a pastry cream. And so it's not quite a frangipane, but it's the layer of dough and then a layer of crushed almonds and then the pastry cream. And then it's covered with the flaky dough at the same time. And it's yummy.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
it's
yummy.
A lot of permutations on eggs and sugar and butter.
Isn't that what pastry is?
Yeah, I think that's what it is pretty much.
Pastry is really that.
Yeah.
So here we go. Okay, we're going to move up from Brittany to Normandy, which is, of course, the big region next door that is also a huge, huge, huge butter and cream region. And, of course, some of the best butter and best cheeses and cream do indeed come from Normandy. And something else that the two regions share is that they both produce enormous amounts of apples.
They do.
As you were saying about the apple cider. Calvados, the liqueur, which is wonderful. I love it. You like Armagnac. I find that it's just as good as Armagnac. I love it. And that, of course, comes from Normandy. And
Too
so,
strong.
Well, I think in terms of the alcohol content, the guess is that they're the same, but there's must be more acidity maybe because of coming from apples. I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, these are certainly not things you can drink a whole lot of at a time.
Yeah, but Calvados is a staple in many people's house.
It's a staple.
It's something that...
Like Armagnac in the Southwest.
Yes.
And it's used, again, like some of these other alcohols in some pastries. So, of course, the tarte normande.
Tarte normande.
It's one of my most favorite things in the entire world.
Okay,
Why?
explain.
Why? Because I love apples. If you want to bribe me bribe me with something that has to do with apples, you just got a good chance. Not 100%, but you never know. Everything that says Normande. So in cooking, in French cuisine, if the word Normande is included in the recipe, it means it has apples in it by definition. So you have dishes that are made with chicken or with other forms of meat like pork. Anytime you see the word Normande, it does indeed mean that there's something connected to apples.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and so of course the tarte Normande is an open-faced apple tart, because in France that is basically always the case. It's an apple, but it's made with very, very, very beautiful tart apples, filled up quite a bit, because sometimes if you buy this industrially made or in a restaurant that just gets something frozen, it's a skimpy thing with a few flaccid slices of apple. I can't stand it. It drives me crazy. I mean, this is one of those things, because I make apple tarts and apple cakes and all this thing all the time. But it's very beautiful apples, and then a wonderful pastry cream that has calvados in it.
Well, the flavor of it would probably be very, very nice. It's just drinking it straight that...
drinking it straight is it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have something that comes from Normandy that doesn't travel to other regions, called a bourdelot, which is wonderful. And I've had bourdelot, Bourdelot.
Bourdelot. L-O-T. Bourdelot.
Yes, and I've had this, I think, once or twice, and this is, to me, this is divine.
This is terrible. I've never had any. Most of these things I have never had. I'm going to have to try them.
I'm so hungry. This is taking a beautiful apple.
Yeah.
Now, in this region, in a lot of the cases, it would be a rennet or something like that, but you take out the core. This would be a preparation that you would use for baked apples, with a relatively, not such a big apple like an American Rome or something like that, but a smaller apple that has a nice tartness to it. It's usually a red and greenish type of apple. And you dig out the core in the center, and you cover the entire apple with a butter pastry crust. It folds up in like an envelope, and they pour a teeny little bit of calvados into the core, just a little bit, and some butter, and it's baked inside the dough in the oven. And when it comes out, it's all luscious inside. And then you take a couple of dollops of crème fraîche and put it on top of it. And oh my God, I'm going to have this is just as awful. And you can have it either warm or room temperature. It is unbelievably good.
That sounds really good.
That sounds really good.
That sounds really good. Bourdelot. I'm gonna have to. I'll try and see if I can find recipes or pictures and all of that and put them on the website.
So now I know we're getting into, but I have to do. This is one more that, of course, is about apples. Not quite Normandy. It's a region that enters a little bit into the center. But since we're doing apples right this second, we cannot forget, because this is one of the most divine desserts ever invented, as far as I'm concerned, and this is tarte tatin.
Tarte tatin. Yes.
Okay. Now, this is the story, apparently. This is one of those where there is a fun story, so maybe it is true.
Possibly.
It was tarte tatin, T-A-T-I-N, which is, for those people who've never had one, an inverted open-faced apple cake with apples that are very thick and have been caramelized. And some people literally bake it in a cast iron pan, and then put the cast iron pan, they cook it first, and then what you do is you use very thick slices of apple. You add butter and a little bit of cinnamon, and you cook it on the cast iron pan, you caramelize it, and then you pour a batter over it, and that goes into the oven. And of course, that's what comes out, and it's usually served, of course, with some cream or some ice cream, and it is unbelievable. Now, the story is that we were two sisters who had a restaurant.
Okay.
And it's actually relatively recent. It's from the beginning of the 20th century. And one of the sisters, her name was Caroline Tatin. They were married, so one of them had her name. I don't know if that was the maiden name or whatever. But something happened, and they both got distracted, and they were in the process of cooking these apples on the stove in this pan in butter, and they got caramelized. And in order to save them, they basically invented this thing at the spot, by pouring some batter over it and figuring, well, what we can do, we've just caramelized or basically burned all these apples and stuck it in the oven. And it became so famous that people would come to their restaurant to have this dessert. And apparently it was presented in a gastronomical salon or gathering in Paris in 1926.
Oh.
And there is still, in the town that they come from, and I didn't mark it down, so you'll have to excuse me for that, but there is apparently still a restaurant, Tat-Town. There is a restaurant, Tat-Town.
Yes.
And this is apparently the place where it was invented. It's in Sologne, which is the land of Georges Sand. So this is near Bourges in the central part, south of Paris. But I love the story because I love the fact that it was started by accident, and it shows you how clever women are.
A lot of women are clever. That's true. But there are a lot of very good things happen by happenstance.
Yes.
You just have to roll with the flow. And,
yes.
If it's completely burned, I wouldn't eat it. But
no.
if it's still looking okay, although something that I've overcooked, I don't think I would have thought to put in the oven next.
Well, obviously they couldn't have been totally black, otherwise nobody would have eaten them.
Yeah. They must have done something right.
They must have done something right. So a couple of other things before we get to the two final, the great things that people seem to have known the most about, and of course people want to hear about. But there's one, I love this because there is this fabulous pastry made with puff paste that is called the Paris-Brest.
Oh, I love those.
And I have never tried to make one. Have you?
No, I've never made one.
Okay. Well,
I've bought many.
It is in the shape of a crown, and there is a buttercream, and then there is a layer of a mousseline made with ground hazelnuts.
Yeah, it's a praline.
It's a praline. So there are two different levels inside. And believe it or not, this is what I think is fabulous. It was invented in 1891 by a pastry chef who had just seen a bicycle race of bicyclers who were going between Paris and Brest.
Oh, that's because I always wondered why the heck it was called Paris-Brest. It has nothing to do with Paris
and
or
it's
Brest.
In the shape of a wheel.
Brest.
And apparently it was presented at a big competition in 1910, and he won some kind of award for it. But when he presented it, it wasn't just the ring. It actually had spokes.
Oh, spokes.
It had spokes. So this whole thing, this fabulous puff paste with this pastry cream, with the praline and everything, it's because of bicycles.
That's a great story.
Isn't that a great story?
I love Paris-Brest. It's really, really rich. But it is such a beautiful flavor. I love the flavor of the praline kind of cream that they put in there. It's perfect.
You know what? I don't think I've ever had one.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
The issue with it is you usually don't find it individual. You usually find it. One. Yeah, you have to buy. And
it was to go for a good pastry maker.
Right, and it was my mother's favorite cake. So we had it as a family dessert a lot. Like half of the time. If I went to my mother's, I'd bring one of those because I knew that was it.
Oh, so
that was the one.
Okay, so it is all kinds of associations.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention this one other thing. We've done a podcast about the city of Reims in east of Paris, and they have this specialty that comes from there called Biscuit Rose of Reims, which I actually bought the last time I was there. They're rose-colored. They look like they belong with Barbie dolls or something like that. But in fact, this is what's so incredible about them. They're in the shape of like a little lady finger, and they are hard biscuits.
Oh.
And in fact...
Why are they pink?
They're pink because they use a special kind of vegetal food coloring.
Okay.
So it's just the food coloring that makes them pink.
Yeah.
But they were invented to go with champagne.
Oh.
And so, and there's a specialty store in Reims that is one of the few places that still makes them according to the original recipe. They're hard. They're the kind of thing you have to dunk, right? And they were invented
like a basketball.
to dunk into champagne or a red, slightly effervescent wine that comes from the Reims area, which I don't know. I'd never tasted.
There's another one?
There's another one.
I see.
But it's a red one, and these.
Ooh,
these,
red effervescent wine.
yeah, but it's like a Valpolicella in Italy. It's just slightly tingly, I guess,
Okay.
But basically, it goes with champagne. So if you ever have cookies around that are hard and you have a glass of champagne, don't get upset and don't get embarrassed if you want to dunk it in, because here's a precedent from the land of champagne.
Dipping is very French. We do that a lot.
Yes, you do that a lot.
Yes, we like to dip.
You dip, and it gets all these yucky crumbs in the liquid. I find it really, I don't like it. But by the way, biscuit, the word in French for cook, what we would translate as cookie, which because it really is not a good word to translate in terms of what it is. It's because it's cooked twice. The original idea of a biscuit.
That's right.
So it was cooked twice.
Very dry.
It's very dry.
Yeah.
So there, and now we come to our biggies.
Okay, the biggies.
The biggies. Okay, first, let's talk about Alsace.
Yes,
okay.
yes. Lovely place that it is.
Lovely place that it is. Alsace, of course, is in the northeast of France, and it has a tradition of pastries that is very similar to what you find in a lot of parts of the United States, because it's more Germanic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is where you will find lots of spices, lots of cinnamon, lots of ginger, and all of these spices, which are not really used in most of the pastries in other parts of France.
Correct.
A lot. So one of course, of the basics that you get there, and certainly around Christmas time, is pain d'épices.
Yes, of course.
Which is a spice cake and or gingerbread. And of course, I love all of these things. Anything that has spices in it like that, you have the cream, I'll take the spices, okay? So pain d'épices, honey cake, spice cake, all of these things are basically Germanic, but in terms of France, they come from the region of Alsace, and you can find them, of course, anywhere around Christmas time.
Yeah.
But in the area of Alsace and Strasbourg and everything else, you will find them all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And a really nice pain d'épices, a nice fresh one. When we go to the even in Toulouse, when they have the Christmas market, they have vendors who make these big balls, of pain d'épices, so spice cake.
Yes.
It's pretty expensive because it's a heavy cake, and so if you're selling it for 40 euros a kilo, well, it's a kilo usually, but even a small slice is going to be heavy. So you have to really, really love it, which I don't.
think I love it, and of course, it's partly that one of the reasons it's so heavy is because it's made with honey. And it makes it very, very, and it's very rich, But you're right. I mean, you can get all kinds. Then the one that they do sell at the Christmas markets tends to be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Now the other
one
of the other cakes that's famous from the area, I have a mold for it. I love it. I haven't done it in a while. Is a Kugelhof.
Kugelhof. Yeah.
The actual the French call it a Kugelhof, and it's a Kugel. There's different spellings of it.
It's a bundt cake.
It's a bundt cake, is what it is, and it's of course a very high raised brioche dough with dried fruit in it, and often covered with confectioner's sugar, powdered sugar, and I just love that myself.
Yeah, it's very good.
I just love it. Now, apparently, a black forest cake, which we can debate whether it's actually originally from Germany or Vienna, but it's definitely something that you will see a lot in that area, and of course it's made with chocolate and with cherries and with a layer of cream. And then they have this thing which I think is hilarious. It's called le pain de non.
Le pain de non?
Yes.
Yes.
You want to translate it, Annie?
It's a nun's fart.
It's a nun's fart. Yes, well, believe it or not, they actually call it that, and it's sold that under that name.
Yes.
And it's apparently was mentioned as early as the 1600s. Now, I'm hoping that it was not inspired by some nun in a convent,
Who would name a cake that? That is disgusting.
I don't know. But actually, what it is it's a kind of donut.
Oh, is that what it is? I've never had it. Just the name puts me off. I don't care if it's from a nun or not.
It's a donut it's just like they take balls of this very fairly thick dough that's got some filled with some little bit of cream and sugar, and they deep fry it, and so it comes out looking kind of like an apostrophe bubble in a bande dessinée in a cartoon, so it'll be round with this little point on it. And
we'll have to look that up.
It's. I was trying to figure out if there's another name for it, but apparently they do sell it under that name.
Oh, well, and French people love to have funny names for things because there's a whole series of jams that have ridiculous names. Like les couilles du pape.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh, well, you can translate that one too.
This is another jam.
Yes.
Les couilles du pape. Oh, I can't say that.
We're going to have to calm her down.
It's a podcast, so I guess the FCC is
yes,
going to come
be
after
careful,
us.
Right?
No, they're not going to come after us. But les couilles du pape means the Pope's...
Yeah, she's not going to do it. I'm not going to do it either. Go ahead. I'll let you do it. Here you go. No?
The Pope's balls is what it means.
Yes,
Sorry, I
that's
apologize.
really what it is,
and the other one, gratte-cul.
No. Annie, you've reached your limit. I'm censoring you. Right.
But it is jam that you can buy. That's what the jam is called.
Well, what's it made of?
I don't even know what it's made of. It's just a funny name. So when you go to these tourist shops and you start looking at the jams, which I like to do.
I've never seen that.
That's because you don't look close enough. They have this
I'm stuck at marmalade. That's basically as far as I've gotten. I don't know.
I'll try and find them and put them online. You'll see on the website. If you like that kind of humor, go to the website. You'll find it.
If you like that kind of humor, Annie loves it. So we come to one of our stars, one I've mentioned earlier because you asked me, and that is the éclair.
The éclair.
Okay, now this is the story of the éclair. Have you ever heard of the great chef from the beginning of the 19th century, a man named Marie-Antoine Carême?
Yes, I have heard of him because I was looking up the history of cakes.
Okay.
For once, I did a little historical research.
So, Mr. Carême, who actually was the chief pastry chef of Napoleon.
Napoleon?
Yes, Napoleon, who apparently hated pastries and was not someone who ate. He was kind of like some other ex-presidents we know in the United States who basically liked junk food. I mean, he was not interested in food, Napoleon. But what he was interested in was appearance and impressing people. And Mr. Carême, who was considered even as a young man who had apprenticed with some of the other great chefs of the kings in the court, he was taken on by Napoleon to be his chief pastry chef. And he invented puff paste.
Aha.
He actually invented it. Now, I don't know. The choux.
Yes.
The actual choux.
Yeah,
He was the one who invented it. It was originally called the form of an éclair, which, of course, is this elongated form. It was originally called the Duchess's cake, and it was served by the court and then presented by Napoleon to his important guests. And it was originally, of course, made with this wonderful pastry cream that he also basically invented that particular recipe for, with either vanilla or coffee or chocolate. And, of course, now you can get it in lots of different flavors. There's many different kinds. You can get praline, pistache. I've seen with pistachio and things like that.
So Elise, I have contradictory information.
Why?
My website said that pâte à choux, so puff pastry, choux pastry, was invented by a chef pâtissier called Popelin. Pâte à Popelin was the original name. I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I just saw it on a website.
I don't know because I read 3 articles about Carême, so it wasn't just a list of the pastry things.
You might be totally right.
And he was he apparently is really he's given the attribution of being the inventor of that.
Puff pastry.
Yeah,
well,
puff pastry.
Who knows?
But it's interesting because he is also considered to be, in the history of France, really one of the 2 or 3 greatest pastry chefs ever. Ever. And he was extremely inventive. So that's very interesting to know.
Yeah,
and
who knows?
then the millefeuille, which Americans call a Napoleon, interestingly
Why
enough.
do they call it a Napoleon?
I have absolutely no idea.
It has nothing to do with Napoleon.
It was invented in 1867. So it's way after he was alive.
See, that's the same information I've got. The millefeuille apparaît dans les boutiques en 1867.
And it was invented by a baker, Rue de Bac, which is in the Saint-Germain area. a man named Seugnon. But it was why it's called a Napoleon in the States. I have absolutely no idea. I really don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because I had been doing a lot of reading about Carême, and all I know is that he was also supposed to have been the one who invented the profiterole.
Ah, yes.
See, so he
Very
basically
nice dessert.
took the puff paste and created all of these different things with it. You
yeah.
know? And of course, profiterole is something, if you go to almost any restaurant, good restaurant in Paris, not necessarily here in the South, but in Paris, many restaurants will serve profiterole as
For
one
dessert.
of the desserts. And of course, it is a wonderful.
It's very good.
It's a wonderful. And then, of course, we have the Madeleine.
Ah,
Now,
yes.
the Madeleine is, of course, for people who have any kind of literary background, is associated with Proust because in his famous series of novels, in about lost time, right?
À la recherche du
À
temps
la recherche du
perdu.
temps perdu.
Qu'on a perdu en lisant Proust.
He talks about how dipping a Madeleine into, now I don't remember, but I believe it's tea, but I'm not sure.
I don't remember.
But it brings back childhood memories.
I thought it was just biting into the Madeleine that brings back.
No, he dips it. He dips it.
Which we do.
Yeah. And of course, what is a Madeleine? A Madeleine is a very small little cake that's baked in a mold that looks like a shell. I don't know what shell, a scallop shell probably.
You need a special mold.
You need a special mold for it. And it's basically a very airy version of a pound cake batter. It's lighter. It's lighter because it has more eggs in it. But it goes back apparently it comes from Lorraine, which I didn't know. It comes from the area around Nancy, and it was produced. What I saw was that it was created by a cook who worked for a marquise. And this was in the middle of the 1750s because she wanted to present it to the Polish duke who ruled Lorraine, which has to do a lot with the complications of French history. But in fact, for a long time, the region of Lorraine, which is on the other side of where Alsace is, was ruled by Polish royalty. Who intermarried with the French royalty. So how come they were able to come over and rule that area? I really don't know. But that's why, in fact, this is an aside that has nothing to do with pastry. But in the city of Nancy, the big square is called Stanislas Square because that was the name of the Polish duke at the time. So that is one of the stories about it. Now, there's another story that says the reason it's in a shell is because it was invented by a cook who went on the pilgrimage of Saint-Jacques de Compostelle.
Ah, well, that makes sense too, because Compostelle is a shell symbol. So, yeah.
But there's no way for sure of knowing.
It's like a lot of history.
Except that they do have, they have note that it was actually produced in the middle of the 1700s already for aristocratic families.
Well, and what I have, my list is contradictory again here. It says that 1533 is when madeleines and macaroons were introduced to the French court.
I have that for macaroons, but not for madeleine.
Who knows?
Okay.
Who knows?
Right. It's
at
weird.
Any rate, the madeleines are very easy to make,
and they're delicious.
And so I'm going to put a recipe on the website as well as a link to the special mold that you need, because those are really extremely French and very
and they're very
good.
Easy and they're lovely.
You know what? At least we've been talking a long time. I think we're going to need to keep the croissants and macaroons for another show.
Let's do the macaroons.
No, it's
too long.
It's too long.
How we can't do a show just of macaroons.
No, but we could add some other pastries. I think we should, because it's an hour and 10 minutes already.
Okay.
We're going to be too long.
Okay. More pastries.
There are so many. Who knew that there were so many?
Who knew? Well, I don't know what the statistics are, but I would venture to say, just like with cheese, that France is the country that has invented and produced more different kinds of pastries than any other.
I think you're right. We are very prolific when it comes to dessert.
And to very inventive
on
things.
Some of us, it shows. And by some of us, I mean me. It's for a good cause, right?
It's always for a good cause.
Okay, so to end the show today, I would like to thank you, Elise,
You're welcome.
and also say thank you to Claire, who talked to me on Google Plus. That was such a special moment. I'm still very lonely on Google Plus, except that now I do have one friend on Google Plus, and it's Claire. Thank you. Now we have a lot more interaction. Our Facebook page is much livelier,
It's
and
lively.
and it's very fun to go there and ask you questions and see your response and all of that. But the one place where I'd like to see more visitors is our website, because it's my baby. I put a lot of time into it, and it's just a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
Our pictures are beautiful.
Yes, my pictures are beautiful. And I put up a movies page a while back, and it's really popular. Lots of people are looking at our movie recommendations, so I'm really happy about that. And the other thing I want to say is I've also got a recipes section, and just this morning I was listening to an NPR story where they were talking about cardoons, which are a vegetable. And the lady who was doing the interview, in my mind, she missed the whole point. Cardoons are wonderful, but there's a great cake. But it's not a cake. It's a kind of a quiche thing that you make with it, and I'll put my recipe on the website there. It's just wonderful. So that's all I wanted to say.
It's not sweets.
No, no, c'est des blettes.
It's des blettes.
It's not sweet at all. But I thought, one of those occasions where, you talk back to the radio. I was talking to the radio saying, no, that's not what you do with cardoons. What you do is what I do. Let me tell you. So I'll put it on the website for fun.
Okay, I'm frustrated about my macaroons.
I'm sorry, Elise. It's just too long otherwise. Next time. Okay.
I'll have to go home and eat a couple.
They're wonderful, and there's plenty to say about them.
Oh, and they are caloric as well.
Yes. Thank you very much. We will talk to you next week.
See you soon.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.